Before we begin, a word of thanks to my dear friend Brett Wilson of mountainzenden.com. Thank you, Brett, so much for your encouragement for this podcast and the music that you've created for the front end and the back end of our podcast. And for today's podcast, also a big thanks to my friend Gary Schmidt of GarySchmidtMusic.com for the beautiful music that's played throughout this podcast. And finally, to my mom and dad, you've just been such an inspiration, and thanks for buying me a motorcycle. Recorded in beautiful Loveland, Colorado. Welcome to Peace Love Moto, the podcast for motorcyclists seeking that peaceful, easy feeling as we cruise through this life together. Are you ready? Let's go. We must be crazy. Why take the risk? Everybody reminds us of the dangers of riding a motorcycle, and they're right. I get it. You know, it depends on which source that you check, but what I've seen is that about 8 to 10% of the U.S. population rides a motorcycle, and I actually thought it was going to be a smaller percentage than that. Well, let's just talk about the facts. We are completely exposed to every other moving thing and things that are not moving, like trees, for example, when we're out on the motorcycle. In addition to being dangerous, owning a motorcycle is not cheap. You've probably noticed that, especially if you have more than one, says the guy who has more than one. Let's start at the top. You are going to need a good quality helmet. That's for your brain. It also protects the rest of your head. And that's valuable, so you've got to spend the money there. Then you're going to need a properly designed and well-fitted motorcycle jacket. That's to protect your skin and your bones and everything else underneath, because you're probably going to fall at some point, and hopefully it won't be a bad one, but you very well may, and you very well may skid. So you need to have something to skid on. You're going to need a specially designed pair of motorcycle gloves and pants and boots, all designed again to protect your skin and bones. Okay, let's talk about finances. You're going to be paying for gas and insurance, of course. If you're like me, you may put more miles on your motorcycle than you do on your car. Now, granted, a motorcycle typically gets pretty good gas mileage, a lot better than the average car. But depending on how much you ride, you're going to be putting a lot of gas through that motorcycle, which is expensive. Speaking of lots of miles, you're probably going to need to replace your tires at least every 8 to 10,000 miles. You'll be lucky if you get a lot more than that. But at least every couple or 3 years, too. They should probably be replaced, and they should be installed by a qualified mechanic at a motorcycle shop, not to mention the other expenses related to preventive maintenance. So all of that said, why spend so much money and take such a risk? Well, I'm speaking for myself, but maybe I'm speaking for some of you too. We ride motorcycles because it makes us happy. It just does. It was a long time ago. My mother took me and my friend Jimmy to see the Bruce Brown film called On Any Sunday. I was 11 years old. This documentary film was not only about motorcycle racing, which I was completely fascinated about, but at its core, it was about the joy of riding motorcycles. Not only alone, but with friends. It was a really fun film to watch. I recommend that you go and find it On Any Sunday. If you watch it, don't miss the very last scene in the movie. It's completely magical. I felt that way as a kid when I saw it originally at the theater, and I feel that way now. It's these three guys. It's the actor Steve McQueen, along with racers Mert Lawwill and Malcolm Smith. Not only are these three guys having a great time together, riding bikes out on a beach, riding wheelies and jumping over dunes, they are clearly great friends, and they are having a blast. A theme song that they use at the beginning and also at the ending of that film was written and sung by a lady named Sally Stevens. Sally said that she was not a motorcycle rider, but after watching scenes of the film as it was being put together, She captured the joy of riding motorcycles in the lyrics that she wrote. She wrote, for example, "Over my shoulder and through the dust, I'm calling. Run wild and catch me if you can. Free as the wind, faster than time, reason and rhyme are running behind. Tasting the sun and feeling the earth, knowing my worth and freeing my mind. Screaming inside of me and laughing out loud, I'm losing contact with the ground. I'm flying." What wonderful, inspiring words. There was an article written about Sally by a fellow named Joe Zimmerman. I'll have details in the description. But I think his impression of Sally's song really captures it well. Joe said, "To describe the spiritual, emotional, and physical reaction bikers have had listening to Sally Stevens' song on any Sunday, it's just startling. It sends chills through our bodies every time. She not only sings to us, she speaks to us in a manner which we fully understand. On a personal level, I can say it gives me goosebumps and transforms me to another time and place where everything is whole and good. A place where humanity and two-wheeled machines are fully alive, youthful, and dancing as one within a place of freedom and happiness." That's really well put, Joe. Well, after seeing that film with my friend Jimmy, the stars must have aligned. Somehow, I convinced my dad and my mom that the only way to stop me from begging for a motorcycle was to find me one. So Dad and I went to the appliance store in town that sold bicycles and mini bikes, and we came home with a little red mini bike. My brand new bike had a 3.5 horsepower motor. Same motor that you would use in a lawnmower back in those days. It didn't have any gears. It only had a rear brake. My parents insisted that I wear a helmet, which was a good thing in hindsight, considering I started running into trees and everything else while I was working on my trails there around in back of our house. I can hear it even now. I can remember pulling the rope that started that little motor. It sounded like a big motor to me. Did you catch that? You pulled a rope to start the motor. I can feel those handlebars vibrating in my hands right now. I remember what it felt like to twist the throttle, and the little bike started to move, and hopefully with me on it. As an 11-year-old, I rode that mini bike all over the fields behind our house, and even to a public park, which was way down a country road from our home. It seemed like a really long way as an 11-year-old. I recently checked it out on Google Maps, and yep, that park on the route that I used to take was 5.5 miles from our home. So I did an 11-mile round trip as an 11-year-old on a little bitty mini bike going down this little dirt road. I still have a picture of it. And how is it that I can remember all the details of how it felt to ride that little bike? It had these small little balloon tires and had these little shock absorbers in the front that hardly worked at all, I can imagine, because I was feeling every bump going down the road. I remember all the dust getting in my eyes and all over my face. It was awesome. Sometimes a truck or a tractor would come down the road, and I wonder what they thought when they saw me. They probably thought, I'll bet his mother doesn't know where he is. And they would be right. It would be another 4 years and 2 real motorcycles before I would actually get my license and legally ride in the same place I used to ride as a little bitty kid. But for that moment in time, life could get no better. I've often thought that if our dreams come true in heaven, I would have the experience of being that 11-year-old again and again, riding that little red mini bike down that old dirt road. As far as deeper reasons for riding, many people reflect on how it's therapeutic, and it is, helping them to deal with maybe traumatic experiences of their past, much like I described in episode 2. Certainly, we all face worries in life, work stress, thinking of our finances, concerns about protecting our loved ones, and lots of different things. That's part of life, right? But how do I say it without sounding like a complete nut? Okay, I'm just going to risk it here. I take care of my motorcycle because it's taken such good care of me. I treat my bikes like a friend. Sometimes I'll even go out into the garage and pat it on the tank and just say thank you for such a good time. Is that crazy? Yeah, probably. The singer Billy Joel, he has a song where the lyrics say, "You may be right, I may be crazy." Well, I guess I'm in good company, right? I assume at least some of you have done the same thing. Also, in that same song are the lines, "Even rode my motorcycle in the rain." I bet many of you done that too. It's raining outside and you really want to go for a ride, so you just do it. You always have a need to test out rain gear, right? On one of my motorcycles, on the lower part of the gas tank, are painted the initials of the person who hand-painted the stripes on that tank. It's a beautiful red over silver tank. And wow, I just wonder if the designers and the assemblers and those who painted these motorcycles realize how much joy they brought to people like you and me. So many of us around the world found the joy of motorcycling. I don't know what I'd be like if I hadn't had the gift of riding a motorcycle for most of my life. I think in some way, when I was 11 years old, after seeing that movie and getting that little red bike, I was transformed. I did something that most of my classmates didn't do, or they didn't have an opportunity to do. I was really lucky. Over the many years, I think of the countless hours and miles that I've spent on the saddle of a motorcycle. Really just riding in circles, right? I mean, they're really just big circles. We go somewhere, then we come back home. It's just a big circle. But just like a kid on that mini bike doing that 5.5 mile one way and 5.5 mile back from the park, I just love it. I just love it. A lot has happened in life since then. But without a doubt, with every ride I take on my bike, in just a small way, I go back to that innocent time. Reflecting back on the last verse of Sally's song, "On Any Sunday," she said this: "On any Sunday, like the tail of a kite, flying and dancing in the wind, I'd like to break the string and drift out of sight. I may not pass this way again." You know, I don't know if my 11-year-old self comprehended the meaning of those words. I doubt that I did. But my friends, I do now. Maybe you do too. So why do we ride? It's because it makes us happy. It just does. Thank you for listening. I wish you peace. I wish you love.